Okay, and since your exam is tomorrow, I want to make sure that I cover any last words that didn't really get highlighted in our new rushed time frame. I've listed them on the screen here. These either show up on your exam or I think could show up on the AP exam, and I forgot um, list them earlier or underline them earlier. Turbidity is just another way to say murky or like cloudy. When things are turbid, they're hard to see through. So this is a way that you can measure how much sediment is in water. It's like floaters in the water. So people use this device called a Secchi disc. It's like a paper plate that's got like two black squares and two white squares, and you lower that into water and you count on the rope how deep it goes before you can't see it anymore. So if the water's really murky, it'll disappear after 1 foot. So you would give it a scale of 1, like it's very, very, very hard to see. It only went through 1 foot. Or like if the water's really clear, you could go like 100 feet down. So on the scale of turbidity, I think it's the other way around. High turbidity means you can't see it, and low turbidity, right? Like a 1 would be that you can lower that disc really far. Anyway, turbidity is a measure of how much stuff is in water, how hard it is to see through water. Remember that when the water's really dark, that will make it very hot, and it can also affect how gases exchange because of that temperature. Next, embankment is just another way to say a canal, right? So canals have a bank. So some people call it an embankment. That's a noun. That's like a canal is an embankment, but that can also be used as a verb. Like the process of embankment is the process of channelization. Mangrove and cypress are two types of trees that are found in coastal wetlands. People say mangrove swamp in the tropics or cypress swamp in the American Southeast. These are just trees that grow in or near saltwater, coastal wetlands. Mangrove is the only tree, I believe, that can live in saltwater. Point versus non-point. This will come up again when we talk about air pollution. That's whether pollution comes from an obvious single place, point pollution, or whether pollution comes from areas, just generalized pollution. That's non-point. And you should have a study goal about this that I didn't lecture about because I thought it was simple, but number 32 will give you examples of this. And the last word you may not know is night soil. Night, like the dark is, night is black. So black soil, that's wastewater sludge. Now, we're all comfortable with fertilizing a field with horse poop or chicken manure or cow manure, but you should know that wastewater sludge is excellent fertilizer, right? Think about it, nutrients, biomass, nutrients, organic compounds, biomass, and then biomass, organic compounds, nutrients. Night soil is just like fertilizer, it's compost. So historically, our Santa Barbara wastewater treatment facility would make truckloads of sludge, send it off to Fresno, and it would be mixed into compost. That's a lot of potential for fertilizer because we have a lot of nutrients coming into humans. So let's use those nutrients when we're done. But what's interesting is our diet contains too many heavy metals and drugs, recreational stuff, chemotherapy stuff, all the heavy metals from eating so much fish. Like there's nothing in wastewater treatment that removes heavy metals or drugs. So all of Santa Barbara's heavy metals from tuna end up in our poop. And that means all those heavy metals end up in that night soil. So now we have to treat our night soil like hazardous material. We have to put it in specially rubber-lined landfills because our poop has too many heavy metals to be used as fertilizer. That's true of developed regions because they eat so many obscure foods. Usually poor parts of the world don't have that problem. They also don't have the drugs in their diet. Isn't that interesting? I think it's really interesting. One major confusion. I want to really hammer this home. Sediment is just like stuff. That could be sand and that could be biomass. Remember that right now it's just sand or biomass. It's little pieces of leaves and little pieces of rocks. That's just sediment. And then this will become organic compounds like lignin and sugars and proteins and fats or whatever, and that will become nutrients, but this is not the same thing. Remember that life goes from nutrients to compounds to biomass through specific processes, and you have to know the steps. Nutrients are used by producers, processes called production, to make bigger compounds. Those compounds are absorbed into biomass. Biomass grows. These get cycled around through other organisms. And then death goes in reverse from that biomass digested down to basic compounds, then decomposed into nutrients. Remember that those are not the same thing. There's like process between them. You would not believe how many students mess this up. Don't mess this up. One thing that's come up, a lot of students ask me a question over the last couple of days. Aerobic and anaerobic bacteria are found in the same places, just in different numbers, right? Like the ocean has a lot of aerobic conditions, but there are still places like down in the sediment where you have anaerobic bacteria. This is true of a lake or a river too. There are parts of the river that are anaerobic, little stagnant pools on the side, or inside of a rotten tree. Under the water, you might run out of oxygen, so anaerobic bacteria are always present. And when you take away oxygen, those anaerobic bacteria can start to party. The reason we worry about dissolved oxygen is things that we do to surface water can lower oxygen levels, right? When we add biodegradable material, or when we make the water hotter, when we make the water stagnant. When we lower oxygen levels, that lets all the poopy bacteria thrive. If you take a poop above a waterfall, when your turd bacteria go tumbling through that waterfall, they get so aerated that the anaerobic bacteria dies. Oxygenation kills anaerobic stuff. But if those poopy bacteria can make it into an anaerobic part of a system, they're going to stay there until that system becomes anaerobic, and then you've got a giant intestine. Remember that it's not one or the other. It's usually like the concentration of aerobic or anaerobic bacteria shifts as the water becomes more or less aerobic. Just some general stuff that I keep telling you and kids keep doing wrong. Please, please, please pay attention to these. On the exams, a lot of you know things and you're not getting credit. When you have to describe, your answer has to be a thing and then describe that thing. So for example, boredom is when Jose talks too much. That became a description. Boredom was just a statement. And if I had said a few words, that would be a list. But if the question asks you to describe, use this shape, use this form. A thing is when description. Or I believe that blah, blah, blah You know, like when this thing happens and you have to describe, please. Likewise, when the question asks you to explain, your answer has to have because somewhere. I don't need your help, Jose, because I just get nervous on the test and I can't remember this advice when I'm taking the test. Or I never remember these things because I don't take notes on how to test. I've got students that are getting F's on the exams that could get A's and B's on the exams if they just thought about how they answer. That's the reason I took a summer class to train you for the AP test. Please, please, please. My questions are written and their questions are written to highlight these forms. We have to look for this in your answer. So describe descriptions, explain explanations, please. Answer the parts separately, A, B, C. And remember that if you're asked for two things, be careful that they're not two of the same. Like if I said how to save water and you said an efficient faucet and an efficient shower head, on my answer key, those are both efficient appliances. That's only 1 point. You just gave me 2 examples of one thing. So be careful when you're asked for 2 options, try to make them different from each other. I'm done. I think this unit is over.